Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I am your host, aspiring author Jonathan Taylor. After I finished writing writing my book, my novel, for a while, and then I finished it a few times after that with edits, I think I am now in a place where I can safely say that I've had it published ready for a while, and now I can announce that I have at least a target publishing date ready, September 15th, in case you're curious. And I sure hope you're curious because that's kind of the whole point of me, launching this channel. So in order to celebrate that, I thought I'd do another round of answering writing questions. But this time I'm doing something a little bit more peculiar or particular. Namely, I'm going to go through the Twitter account of another writer, and I will answer his questions. The writer in question is called Jonathan Jenkins. He was a teacher before he became a writer. Maybe still is. I should actually check that. Hold up. Okay, he was a teacher and a newspaper reporter. Okay, colorful life he's had. And now he is writing and asking a whole bunch of stuff of other writers on Twitter. And I thought, why not? I'll celebrate this settling on a publication date by going through his Twitter account or profile, and just answering whatever questions he has. I won't answer them all in succession. I will skip around a bit, so if there's any dead air, I apologize in advance. So let's settle on 15 minutes on the clock, and let's get started. 73 years ago, after surviving Pearl Harbor, World War II, and 2 atomic bomb tests, USS Nevada is sunk by a torpedo. How hard is it to get your MC down and out of action? This is how he generally structures his questions. First of all, there's a random historical fact, and then there's a question that is in some way connected to that fact. I'll read them both because I don't know. I think they're both fun. I think they're both not necessarily funny, but interesting. Some of them might go into some dark places, so beware. And now to actually answer the question: how hard is it to get your MC down and out of action, or MCs in my case? Well, they are both human, so as such they do have certain vulnerabilities that can be exploited. But overall, they're actually pretty tough, especially if they know what can come up against them. They are very much capable of adapting to it or countering it. And given they have some level of education in magic proficiency as well as in general strategy and tactics, they can counter a lot of things. Not anything, but a lot of things. Moving on. Oh, this is a dark one. 80 years ago, Goering orders Heydrich to find the final solution. You misspelled Goering, by the way, but whatever. How far will your antagonists go to achieve their goals? Well, my antagonists are theocratic fascists, so yeah, expect final solutions to be suggested if they win. 258 years ago, Pontiac wins the Battle of Bloody Run. What becomes your protagonist's reason for continuing the fight? Well, aside from it being their actual duty, well, they're fighting, they're fighting little terrorists, and they care about not just protecting their own life, but they are also about protecting the lives of their community. So, yeah, that's pretty much their motivation. Grossly stated. They have their particular ones, but I'm not going to go into them. The book details those. Okay, moving on. 570 years ago, France's Charles VII has Jacques Coeur arrested. Name an abuse of power in your MC's world. Well, um, I think I've mentioned before that when the Empire in my in my stories in my novel's backstory crumbles, it is replaced by five republics. One of these republics sees itself as a more legitimate successor to the Empire, and there is a certain faction within that republic that wants to rekindle its glory. And in doing so, they do some pretty pretty messed up things. I won't go into what they are, just that they exist. Okay, I will give an example because otherwise it just kind of comes off as a cop out. They arresting political prisoners, dissidents, stuff like that. Also denying certain people certain should I say privileges or positions they would arguably be more qualified for because they value to some extent in certain positions loyalty more than competence. 50 years ago, Apollo 15's astronauts land on the moon. What occurrence was fascinating at first but has become commonplace in your MC's world? Fortunately, I can give an example, not necessarily from my MC's lifetime because they're 19, all of them, but at least from their teacher's lifetime, namely flight, or more precisely, powered flight. This was considered impossible or at least very difficult some 40 years ago, and then 35 years ago, in story, the first such flight took place. And after that, for a long while, it was still quite a rare occurrence. But then came the war that led to the dissolution of the empire, and pretty much every side invested heavily into developing an air force. And because of that, air forces have become quite air transport in general, flight in general, has become quite quite commonplace. There is actually to the point where there is actually a very expansive air force that is similarly structured to the army and to the navy. 76 years ago, Japanese submarine I-58 torpedoes and sinks USS Indianapolis. US Navy doesn't find survivors for 4 days. When your protagonist begins a search and rescue, what hinders them most? Well, that depends. Is the search and rescue in enemy territory? If so, they will have to come up with a way to counter that. And given two of my MCs are kind of hotheads, that becomes increasingly much more of a challenge. If it is generally in harsh wilderness, I guess they don't really know what they'll expect. They might necessarily get how to counter that. And in that case, I think the two MCs who are hotheads can go in and actually figure out something to counter a specific threat from the environment, and then the other two can kind of systematize it, so to speak. 210 years ago, the Spanish execute Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla for leading an insurrection in Mexico, or Mexico, should I say. Do any of your characters break an oath of non-violence to stop your antagonist? My MCs are all military officers, or are trained to be military officers, so they don't really make any kind of oath like this. The military itself actually is undergoing a shift. Namely, it is going from fighting is fine, but considering how you fight and to what end is better. And it is trying to instill that in its officer corps. Have them think more strategically, not just go guns blazing. Guns blazing here being metaphorical because guns are actually pretty rare because everyone has magic, so you don't really need guns, or you don't need them as much. Okay, I'm skipping for a lot now. Well, this is a curious one. Apparently yesterday at the time of me filming this, was the Independence Day for Vanuatu, from both France and Britain. Have two characters fight to be your MC's love interest. Well, I can't speak for all of my MCs, but oh no, I will speak for all of my MCs. Um, I think Marfa has had more than one love interest, but I haven't really you know, presented them on a page. I have only presented one. Elizabeth, I've only presented one. Juliana arguably has more than one, but there's only one that really, works out. And Victor is kind of just bumbling around. Whatever happens with him happens. So, moving on. 34 years ago, 2 days ago. So, I'm not going to go further with that. 34 years ago, Britain and France agreed to build the Eurotunnel. What major task does your MC agree to assist? Not the MC themselves, but their parents. They volunteered to be recruited in the war that led to the Empire's dissolution. It was initially just a war between noble families, but after a while once it kind of became a stalemate between those noble families, their supporters just kind of erupted into their own little factions with their own goals, and it was a real mess. So yeah. Okay, moving forward. 73 years ago, the Olympics are renewed after a 12-year break. What cultural tradition does your MC restore? Why the fuck did I read this one? Anyway, there aren't really any cultural traditions that the MCs themselves restore, but there are some where they quite happily participate. Marfa, for instance, is required by her school to do a coat of arms, and she was among the first students to actually present one. Elizabeth went to the same school and just barely delivered it on time, so that should give you an idea of who they are as people, or how they relate to tradition. And now, in the exact opposite, 63 years ago, Eisenhower creates NASA. I'm liking President Eisenhower more and more the more I read about him, but I digress. How futuristic is your MC's thinking? Elizabeth is the most futuristic. Everyone else just kind of, okay. Martha wants to, only cares about making sure her nation and her people are safe, or the nation or people she cares about are safe. Elizabeth has, to some extent, a greater or more forward-thinking perspective, so to speak. Juliana very much just lives in a moment, and Victor kind of flip-flops between. Moving on. 1,117 years ago, Saracen pirates begin a week of pillaging Thessalonica. How much does your antagonist take from your protagonist? Well, there are two major battle sequences, and in both of these sequences, I will say some or all of my MCs get injured, and also in both these battles they end up losing people. But I can't really give anything more precise than that away, for now at least. 1,783 years ago, Gordian III becomes the 6th Roman emperor in less than a year. Oh yeah, that was a fun year. How stable is the government in your MC's world? Well, as of right now, it is actually surprisingly stable. They've been fortunate enough that they actually that the empire had a series of reforms before it ultimately collapsed, a series of reforms that led to more local and to some extent even regional governments, and this model could just be expanded to to where it would fit nations. And while there are some shakeups here and there, they're nothing really too spectacular. Like no one's getting assassinated or anything. There might be a scandal that might force someone to resign, but that's really about it. And even then, they're talking something that happens like once every 5 years or something. Okay, this is kind of hard, and I only have a minute left, so I'll have to see how I can. I think I might just have 1 or 2 questions to really answer. 104 years ago, NYC hosts the Silent Parade. How do people protest injustices in your MC's world? Well, for the most part, protests there work the same as protests in in our world. You just have a bunch of people who gather around and share their grievances. You might have some public spaces being occupied, but overall they are mostly peaceful. Mostly. Of course, there are areas of the world where that are less democracy friendly, but I don't really go into those too much, or at all. 125 years ago, Miami, Florida is incorporated. What are the beginnings of your MC's hometown? Well, let's see. Luckily, Mark and Elizabeth have the same hometown, and I can say it is it was originally the seat of a noble family, or the castle that is around which the city is built was once the home seat of a noble family, and then the castle just kind of emerged around it. Oh, and I'm out of time, but I will still answer this question. So yeah, that's the story with Martha and Elizabeth City. Juliana's hometown started out as a trading outpost, which eventually grew and grew, became an industrial center, and is now one of the leading examples of urban farming in the former Empire's territory. And Victor's place just started out as a logging outpost, and then eventually expanded into more industrial sectors of economic activity once certain ores were discovered, as in mineral ores were discovered in its vicinity, and it grew from there, became a city. Yeah, all my MCs are city dwellers. Can't say that word. Are city dwellers. That's a thing that happened. And as I said, my time has been up. Thank you very much for your attention. And as I said at the top of the video, Heir to the Empire: The Next Generation becomes available September 15th, presumably. I hope you will enjoy it. If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, maybe share it wherever you think people will enjoy it or find it useful. If you have any questions you'd like to add, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next videos come out, then I suggest then I will say please subscribe. Maybe also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.